Let's just get started here. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us again for our June webinar on uncovering hidden internal expertise. We're Internet Connections, and we've been specializing in better employee experiences in hybrid, deskless, and geographically dispersed organizations for 25 years. I'm Jasmine. I'm the one chatting, and I'm the marketing coordinator for here at IC. But without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest, Marian, and our host, Rob. So, Marian has 9 years of experience in public health communications and has previously worked as a web architect and information services coordinator for the County of Heron. For the past 14 years, she's built 3 corporate intranets using the IC platform. Having taught search strategy methods for the Interior Library Services, Marian is passionate about accurate information findability. And outside of work, she enjoys theater productions, building puppets, and exploring Southwestern Ontario and British Columbia. Thanks so much for joining us, Marian. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Rob Nickel is the CEO of Intranet Connections. First joining as the VP of Software Development, Rob now captains IC as we sail into the future of internal comms. He's passionate about helping organizations establish an effective online workplace that enables employees to be productive and engaged. He's worked with intranets for 2 decades and is proud to have helped hundreds of organizations create a thriving internal hub that can reinforce their culture and community. In his spare time, he's an avid sports fan and participant and is a dedicated father of 3. I'll pass it over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Jasmine. Appreciate it, and really thankful to have you, Marian, with us today. I know that we've worked together a number of times over the last years, and you're a wealth of experience and knowledge. So the topic today is going to be one that I don't think we have enough time to pack all the content and expertise in 1 hour, but hopefully we can pick your brain a little bit. Anyways, I wanted to start off because, aging ourselves, we've been working with intranets for a few decades and a lot of experience, but there were some interesting studies you shared, and some of these from years ago. 2006, you had this study that you're looking at from the Global Internet and Portal Strategy Survey. Only 13% of senior executives at that time considered an internet business critical. You fast forward just 5 years back then, firms were changing it from being a place for the corporate to put stuff to actually becoming a place where people got their work done. And that's, a couple decades ago. Fast forward now and things have become much more online, particularly with post-COVID. And I know you've managed intranets from pre-COVID, during COVID, after COVID. So it'll be interesting to talk about some of those experiences. So maybe we just start off by sharing a little bit about, can you talk about the purpose and utilization of intranets and how they've evolved through the time that you've been working with them?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Rob. I think first of all, it's always important to take a look at the fact that IT professionals are very adept at technology, but sometimes when it comes to the intranet, they lack the skills in information categorization and organization. And those are 2 aspects that really can impact intranet usability. And by that, I mean that they don't know a lot about how to categorize, organize, or enhance the findability of information. At least I found that in all 3 of the builds that I had with your software. And I'm not sure whether I noticed that primarily because of the fact that I had a strong library background and a background in web architecture. So it seems like we can often have intranets that and other IT applications that perform perfectly well from a technological point of view. But if they don't contain a lot of useful information, or that information actually is not well organized, they just won't be used by your staff. And if your information in your intranet is categorized, it's indexed, and you have great software that does all that indexing, and it's well organized, it not only gets used by your staff, but it definitely will increase their productivity. The best information environment that any organization can have is that total mix of your computers, your networks, and people with expertise. And don't be afraid of that word expertise, because I really believe that that expertise that you need to have a robust intranet can be found, built, or nurtured within your organization. You made reference to a study that Jane McCowell had done in 2006, where she found that only those 13% of senior executives that she polled felt that their intranet was business critical. Well, within 5 years, she did another study. And at that time, she found that leading firms were really starting to change their intranets from being that place to where people post that corporate stuff to that place where people can get their work done. And out of that, there have been annual studies quite often done on intranets. Usually there's the design, who's got the best intranet, and some definite trends are starting to evolve. There's always that team orientation, and we've seen that, and I saw that myself in our builds where we increase collaboration through building project and team spaces, and the microblogging, the use of leadership communication out to staff via microblogs. There's always the use of compliance notifications that can be initiated to use read and confirm features so that the documents or new content that you're putting out on your intranet have been seen by your staff. Some people will look at their frameworks. One that I really liked was that info system. And that's a global leader in digital design services. And they reported in 2023 that they did a redesign for their intranet, and they used the 5 C's for organizing their content. Instead of organizing their content by their teams or departments or aspects such as human resources or benefits and that sort of thing, they used 5 C's, and they were connect, collaborate, celebrate, care, and culture. And that's such an innovative way to organize your content. During the pandemic, I was working for Huron-Perth Public Health. And for us, real-time communication and using our intranet for that was really important. We had to keep abreast of provincial announcements and changes in the health sector, what's happening in the COVID testing and isolation instructions, and was vaccine available, and when were we expecting it? So I was able to do things like setting up alerts for changes that were being made by the Ministry of Health pages on both the provincial and federal websites. And then I could incorporate some IFTTT programming to connect different web applications and automate some of the tasks. That meant that I could keep sections of our intranet current with information that was being needed by our staff. One thing that I did was alerts from both the feds and the province, which I was dealing with. They would get it fed automatically into a blog on our intranet, and the headlines would be pushed out to our homepage. And so that was one way that I could keep track of real-time communication in a fairly easy way for me to manage. And then another one that I really like, because so many of us are business sites now, post-COVID, we found that, we can come use hybrid work experiences. And last year, OCBC, the bank in Singapore, started using their intranet to support the hybrid work by using a desk booking tool that they delivered on their intranet. It allows employees to book a desk, that they can use in their main offices, and they scan a QR code on their desk when they arrive. And if a desk hasn't has been reserved but isn't occupied by 10 a.m., they're released to other staff during the day. And they also have done a similar situation for booking lockers for staff to be able to store their personal belongings when they're on site. And these are just some of the creative ways that that our intranets can be used.
Awesome. Thanks for that background. You covered so many different points. I'm not sure where to go to next. Honestly, I could touch on a bunch. I didn't know the 5 C's that you'd mentioned before, and I'd find that really creative in terms of a way to organize. Because most commonly you do see, department, team sites, project sites, these sorts of things. But the way to categorize content that way is something that's a little bit more unique. One thing I'm curious about is, what's the consequences of poor content management in that regard?
Okay, yeah, that's a really great question, Rob. Because content, is so vital to us. It's and I guess one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that organizations have a lot of dynamics, that come into play. There's actual our work environment, like the bank in Singapore, coming up with a creative use of their physical site. We also think there's also the human resource management and what systems are we using? Are we using Zoom? Are we using Teams? Are we, how are we leveraging our intranet? And what are we doing with email? And governance, what are the policies and procedures that we're going to put? And leadership can play an important part, and so is culture, and actually even the people that we've got employed. And aligning our intranet and its functionality with that organizational needs, I think, is probably key. Um, and that, comes into play, like, where do we start? It can also come into play with what are we going to do that's going to make a significant difference to our organization? How to organize, retain, and find information. Um, yeah, the 5 C's, that's a great way to organize, but also it might work for that company, but not necessarily for your company. And so the culture and that comes into play. Also, content management, is really vital, because intranets can become very cluttered. Think of the grocery store bulletin board where everybody's putting all kinds of stuff in it. If you don't add some organization, you can't find the information you're looking for, and that whole system becomes inefficient. So, having a centralized system, how you're going to track down information and eliminate staff frustration is really important. I also love the fact that Intranet Connections, you've always stressed the importance of using your intranet as a single source of truth. And that's really important. And along with that, findability becomes really important. And that's one of the things I always liked about your product, Rob, is the fact that you have search and a really robust search engine built in. I can search the entire site. I can search within a type of site. I can filter. I can use tagging. There's all kinds of ways in which I can really fast track the needs of getting to that information. The other thing I think it's important with management to think about is digital life cycle. Um, you know, um, how long is that item going to be there? And it's important to think about your information from its creation right through its deletion and to all the formats, whether it's a document to email, and as part of that, um, you want to think about governments and how you're going to manage that. Good content management, when it's in place, it improves your productivity. It's that key to facilitate collaboration through information sharing. It also ensures that your employees are working from the same document versions in real time, and it supports that classification system of being able to access the information. So, yeah, in essence, content management is really important, and without it, um, you reach a lot of roadblocks.
Absolutely. You touched on a lot of different aspects there. We also had just a couple polls. I'm not sure if you saw the summary there, but I'll just reflect those, Jasmine, as I think you're closing the second poll maybe. First one was, which area of knowledge governance do you feel most confident about in your organization? Most people feel they can easily create and capture content about knowledge and procedures and these kinds of things, but and store it. But the dissemination and sharing is an area of improvement, or protecting that knowledge and retaining it. More the challenge area, which was interesting. And then the second poll, it was more about rating their overall maturity of their content governance framework. So you're just talking about content management, content governance. People feel pretty comfortable about it, but there's room for improvement, but moderately mature, which is great. And there's always some opportunities with different tools and automation, as you mentioned, Marianne, to make sure that certain information stays current, it's updated, it's the latest version, or things are being curated and archived or even permanently deleted. I think one thing I saw in the notes that we talked about before with the digital lifecycle, I've met with many customers where they have thousands and thousands of pieces of content in their intranet. They just they don't know, but it's not getting much viewership. Why even have it there? So there's lacking some of that ending of the life cycle part of the process. So question I have for you, how can organizations implement effective content governance? So what are some ways that people could improve that maybe are wanting to bump up to the really very mature level?
Okay. Well, for one thing, most organizations have some form of policies and procedures. There's always standards and guidelines, and depending on what your business is, almost all of us, for some legal reason, have some form of retention period that we have to keep information, in place. And one of the first things I think I would take a look at is, you probably have some existing policies in place. Even before you started building your intranet, there would have been policies and procedures in place for dealing with content. How long you have to keep something or whatever. I would start by going back and taking a look at some of those documents and make sure that references are already made, or if not, put them in on how you're going to deal with it digitally on your intranet. That's one of the first things. The other thing that you want to do is um, take a look at, if you've got those things in place. What you want to do is make sure that um, any kind of a governance or policies, procedures, what it's doing, it's supporting your business objectives. And those objectives usually are to improve productivity, ensure compliance. You want to minimize any chance of any kind of information breach, and that you've established some kind of control and consistency in place. Um, I actually think that there are 7 benefits, to it, and that's supporting your business objectives, improving the productivity, compliance, all of those things that increase staff awareness and enhance your organizational agility. Um, Everybody who handles information within your organization is in some small or large way part important for information governance. You want all of your staff to obtain and handle information fairly, ensure its accuracy, and share the information. Um, Life cycle is probably another one of the easiest ways to do that. Have you documented, when you're going to review something, and and are you going to archive it? Are you going to delete it? How do you keep track of when you've updated things? And I know that the IC platform and other platforms too will have in place how, some form of automated way of tracking that, identifying the person who's made the last updates, and what you just have to do is implement those things. They're built in. You may not be using them yet, but take a look at your system. They will be there, and you just have to, put them into practice and play. Um, I also think that there's some informal governance that takes place, and that's in the form of your champions of the intranet, your senior managers, or it could be department leaders um, who are endorsing the use of the intranet and the use of the policies, and get them into play. I also think that, having some functional governance in place, and that can come in different forms. You may have a main intranet administrator, and maybe that person sits down and listens to what your staff and your teams and your departments, what are their needs, and then use that information to um, build your intranet, determine the information architecture or the navigational schema of your intranet. You referred, Rob, into knowing, what information is being used. This is where take a look at your analytics. Your intranet will, those analytics will tell you what documents are being most used, how frequently people are actually accessing different things. And sometimes, you know, it's highlighting those pieces of information, or could be a form, the vacation form for one thing, or time off form, that people go to on a regular basis. And highlight those in your navigation, bring it out into a sidebar, and make it easy for your staff to access those things. Don't keep things hidden. Find out what your information's needs are of your staff, and highlight it, bring it forward.
I
It
like
will,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it will not only increase the use of your intranet, but hey, they know that it is that one place to go and look for the things. They'll stop bookmarking it on, or keeping copies of it on their desk just because they use
Right.
it
Yeah.
frequently.
And maybe outdated copies if they're downloading things, right? And instead of just accessing the latest and greatest because it's easily at their
Definitely.
fingertips. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting as you're talking, I was thinking, and I noticed one of our customers, David, I'll call you out by name here, was on the, he does some great job around this kind of thing, maintaining some master lists of content and involving his stakeholders in ongoing governance and reviews of content. But what I appreciated particularly about what he showed me was how he breaks it down so it doesn't feel overwhelming and prioritizes the most important pieces, as you mentioned, using stats, understanding, so that people, maybe your stakeholders are only reviewing a couple pieces of content a month, and you're not feeling overwhelmed because everyone has their day job with everything they have to do, and this is some piece that sometimes feels like an extra effort on the side. So I really appreciated that. So one of the next questions that I had in mind here was, what are some common customization challenges? Because every organization has different ways that they want to manage the metadata or store the information around their knowledge and their content. What are some common customization challenges you've experienced?
Okay. I think one is probably your workplace culture. And we all run into that, in various forms. Um, so I think one thing that you have to do is you have to sit down and have some kind of agreement on how you're going to do that customization. It could be just as simple as sitting down and saying, this is the time frame that I need. This is who's going to do it. and this is what I expect. So timing, roles, and responsibilities. But you also have to, while you're doing that, be sensitive to the values, beliefs, and norms that actually might exist both formally and informally in your organization, because that will certainly come into play. Um, I think you have to go back and think about any kind of change that you're making, and even if you're timelining something, um, it's going to not only change your intranet, but will either directly or indirectly have some kind of a cultural change on your organization. Um, it has that potential. It's like, think of it as the haves and the have-nots. If you're establishing something or something new, are you going to roll it out to slowly, and pilot it with just a few people, or are you going to have done roll it out to everybody? Think of it, if you had fast internet access and somebody else doesn't, or you are able to access information on your phone and somebody else isn't, it that has a real change on people. I also think about how you can leverage your intranet. And I think you also hit on this when you were talking about David's experience. And that is how you can use that intranet to be a tool in cultural change. And an example that I can think of is getting rid of all of those all staff email blasts and only putting alerts on the homepage of your intranet to deliver that kind of information. Not the, oh my gosh, we've got a code white or whatever happening in the building, that you probably have other ways and multiple avenues to get that information out so that everybody's getting it like immediately. But if you put out a manager's email, um, maybe it should be a blog, with an alert on the intranet, and that's a way of getting people off the email and onto the intranet. It's also a way of getting that information into a place that it can be searched very easily and available for staff that have maybe missed that email, or they've come on board after that email had been out. I also think
you painted that picture really well. I just wanted to sorry to interject, but I had just met with a customer group an hour ago, and this one bank was talking about their addiction to email. They've been working with the internet for a few years, and there's some good use cases in adoption, but there's still that cultural shift that needs to happen, and that behavioral change of just putting out emails, right, versus some of the tactics that you just described. So thanks. I like that you touched on that.
Oh, for sure, Rob. And the other thing is too, that's the kind of case or cultural change that has to come from a top down.
Yeah,
Like
just to David's
management
point
has
here.
to embrace that and say, this is what we're going to be doing going forward. And not support both, not post it on your intranet and send out the email blast because you want to move people over. You're trying to make a cultural change. So you can't support both. You can't, just do both of them. I
just wanted to mention before you carry on, if anybody has questions or comments, feel free to put things in the chat, and we're also going to reserve a bit of time for Q&A at the end. So just highly encouraged to interact with us that way. Sorry, Marion, carry on.
No, for sure. That's great. I love questions. They're always good. And I also think too, your decision-making process when you're making these kinds of changes with how you're changing, your handling of information has to be transparent. I like to try and at least the times that I have followed this, I've had more success. Frame that decision, gather information that supports and, will give direction to that. Identify any kind of feasible alternatives, and that email blast, versus versus the blog, versus an alerts is a good example. Also, to identify how you're going to evaluate what you're implementing, and make a decision, take action, and don't be afraid to learn from the experience. And sometimes you can learn, lessons learned from experience will actually help to defend or explain what actions you're taking. That's something I've done when I've been an administrator on an intranet. People, I let them come to me and give me direction and I'll sit and listen to them, and then ask them, okay, what is the real information need here? And then take a look at what alternatives I've got for meeting that need, and then explain why I'm going to do something. I also think when you're customizing something, you have to keep in mind what what else comes into play. An example for this for me came when we were had a naming or numbering sequence for policies and procedures at the health unit. Now, most times that when you're ordering or sequencing something for ease of retrieval, it's either alphabetical or numerical. And the content I was handed, and your computer, your intranet can handle both alphabetical and numerical ordering, and you can sort that way too. Well, the content that they handed to me was neither. It was ordered by section. We had HR, we had privacy, we had legal, etc. And senior management wanted it all to be available in that same sequential order that they were used to finding in the hard copy binders. And with a binder, order can be random, but a computer doesn't know how to organize that random section of information. So I had to establish a mapping system that was used the binary values that the computer would follow to provide information for the staff. So what we ended up doing was we created like a section, and then what it was like, and that. So our system became something that looked like 01.001, and then I would put a .a if it happened to be an appendix to a policy or procedure. So it was a number that used the binary system. Then we had the section title, which staff were actually used to, kind of gave them that sections of the binders. And then we followed it by the policy or procedure. And that allowed us to create an index that no matter how people were used to trying to find something, they could find it. And also new staff members who had no idea what this binder had originally looked like, but were used to doing keyword searches, they could still use that because our intranet had a robust search engine. It would search the title, it would search the content, it would search that new numbering system that we came up with. And people were still able to find what they were looking for. So, that I'm not sure whether I actually answered your full
No, it's a
question
great
there,
example,
Rob.
right? You're catering to different needs. Some people who are visual and remember a certain way that the information was stored can look at that and know, I know it was down here in this area, and versus just being able to search, right? Based on keyword or more based on the actual content itself. You're supporting different user preferences, which is fantastic. You made me chuckle a little bit because on the side I help with the Strata Council, and there's a secretary who's established naming conventions in the system that I've helped them support to put in place. And sometimes I'm like, oh, naming conventions, do we really need these? But they are quite important, right? Because different people consume and want to organize information differently. And also you can convey a lot of information with a naming convention versus just
Exactly.
having a file with a few words and you're going, when was that created? Who? What's it related to? So there's a lot of information that can be conveyed with naming conventions.
Oh, for sure. And quite often a naming convention that is established for one system can actually feed over and almost build a crosswalk to something else. Like I keep thinking in the health sector quite often, you can have one name that people will always use, and if you're in that work actively in that sector, it means one thing to you, but it isn't something that common people would use. I ran into that with municipal government because ambulance versus emergency medical system. Which one? Okay, if you're a paramedic and that you're used to the emergency medical system, EMS is that, but Joe Public, they want an ambulance, and that's what they're going to think of. So you can build crosswalks where certain words will actually either through a tagging system or whatever, and you add that onto your findability for your information, and you can satisfy multiple audiences that way.
Makes sense. Can you share maybe a few other ways how organizations can customize their knowledge base? Some things that you have in mind?
For sure. I think first of all, individual responsibilities. Having for a lot of teams, you're going to have people that know how your platform works or have certain goals, and have have the authority for making the decisions. So there's individual responsibilities. One, taking a look at what kind of project goals you've got. It could be the one I kept thinking, and that determined us a lot for the second build that I did was, and I felt it was the most successful corporate intranet for which I was a project manager. We had four main goals. It had to be a platform for internal communication. They wanted to increase collaboration, improve document findability, and reduce duplication. So we had four really simple project goals. All the work that we did on the intranet were driven and fed into one of those four or multiples of those four. The other thing that we did was that we had a phased build out, um, and with an emphasis on organizing and structuring our content. We knew that we were building on an IC platform. You had a central, robust search engine, and so that I was able to use that to leverage how we were building out, and I had a really strong project team structure. I had sponsors, I was the project manager, and I had a steering committee that fed information to me, and they represented all of our departments in that health unit, and we had 7 members total. We also spent a lot of time on information architecture. Um, we wanted to make sure that we selected the right menus and labels, um, and each level of navigation. We wanted it to be descriptive, specific, and exclusive to our users so that they knew where and how to navigate the intranet without any kind of hesitation. So we structured everything around 7. We felt that if we had too many categories, it would create difficulty, and also we were really conscious of having any overlaps in results, and meanings of things. We also decided to use navigation, and metrics came into play a lot. I wanted to use a lot of quick links, navigational shortcuts to popular content, placing it on the main homepage or on, if it was unique to a team or a department, on their homepage. I also wanted to make sure that I would use metrics to find out what was the most viewed, what were trending tags, what were the most popular documents, top stories that people had, latest comments. That can drive a lot. and the most commonly used forms. And those sorts of things, I knew I had to make ways of how to make it rise up to the top. We also had staff training and engagement, and we used that throughout our phased build. And we provided staff training based on roles. Sometimes I got to assign people to roles, might be a manager would assign somebody. And I also wanted to create a real sense of fun, because I knew that fun would get more buy-in than something that was being serious. So we had, to help me identify the content for the intranet or content for um, team spaces, we had archaeologists and explorers. And those are the people that would suss out whatever we had, identify it, and probably do an information dump on me, and then I got to deal with it. I had crash test dummies. Those were the people that I used in my user testing, because I like to, before I rolled out anything, I'd like to try and test things on small groups of people. And so that offered me that ability to try something, be crazy about it, evaluate it, and refine it, and then roll it out to everybody. So we had the archaeologists and explorers, we had the crash test dummies, and then we came into licensed drivers. Those was the level of training that we gave, the hands-on and the how-to. Some of them elevated to being how-to experts. It could be an expert for their team, an expert for a function, and that it maintained that level of fun, but it bought me a lot of buy-in for it. And then we also did we did some customization, we found out, and that customization, sometimes it came out in the form of our training, because a lot of people, they only do single word searches, or there are the people that, like to browse. Think of how you yourself search Google. Are you a browser? Are you, do I'll know it when I see it? Do I make use of the automatic fill-ins that search will do, when it applies extra words when we're starting to type things, and use that, leverage that information. So that's those are just some of the ways in which I use to help customize my knowledge base.
Awesome, Marion. Thank you. You've had so many examples. I wanted to move around to a little bit more around connecting that with the people information of your intranet, and you're connecting people with each other on skills and competency. You talked about licensed drivers. I think you're a so-called Adobe licensed driver, right? I think people used to go to you as for your Adobe skills, if I remember right. So maybe you could touch about how can you build a comprehensive employee directory, and how could that benefit the organization?
Okay. Yeah. My profile, I had that I was a Adobe expert. Um, when you have to think about how the information is fed into your directory, your IT staff will always have up-to-date information about your employees and their levels of security and that's all stored in your Active Directory. And usually that sort of information you can't change. It's the IT department that's changing that. And how much information they put in that individual profile of somebody in their AD, can be fed back into your intranet. And it can be extension numbers, office locations, and you'll see that come up in individuals' profile. If it's not there, chances are IT hasn't put that in. But your staff profiles, there are aspects of it which your staff members can actually edit themselves. They hover in IC software. I know if you bring up your staff profile, you'll hover over anything and you see a pencil icon. When you roll your cursor over it, it means you can edit it. So having your staff um, fill out their profiles. put their professional expertise in. That's where I was an Adobe Wrangler in mine, and what your interests are. That's how you can find out where some of your experts are. I, I found out in our organization we had some wonderful Excel spreadsheet experts, and that was because they'd put it in their profile. So I could go to them directly and say, I'm having a real problem with this. What am I doing wrong? And I could get some one-on-one to help there. Um, Also, you have to remember if that information isn't there, you're not going to get it out. And it's the same with that AD profile. If your IT staff haven't filled it out, you're not going to be able to leverage it to your advantage. Um, Getting people to fill out their profile, I had a contest. And what I did was I had them put a unique tag in their profile when they'd filled it out. Our intranet was called the Wave, so it was hashtag in the pool. And then I ran stats and I gave out prizes for maybe the 10th person to do that or the 20th person or whatever. And it was amazing how much we were able to learn about our colleagues, learn about their personal professional expertise and their interests simply from their profiles.
I love that simple tactic that you did. That's a great example because not everybody takes the time or there's an incentive or reason to go and do it. And starting to create some mechanism for that catalyst to get it started is a great way to do it. What are some of the best practices for implementing expertise tagging, like you're mentioning?
Okay. Well, tags, they're great. They're a reliable guide. They make your content, shout, hey, I'm here, and because there's a lot of digital clutter, and I hate to say that on people's intranets, but it's online, it's a digital repository. There gets to be clutter. Um, some of the things that you can do is tags are the turbochargers for search. By adding tags, you can improve your teamwork. They help you stay organized. So, one of the first things you can do is think like your users. Again, it's that EMS versus the ambulance. And think of when you go to add a tag, first of all, have your administrator turn tagging on. It has to be on the system. If you have it hidden and not being used on your intranet, tagging won't be of any benefit to you. But I like to think about what the other person is going to think about. What information are they likely going to associate with it? Is it a report? If it's a report, tell me it's a report. That might not be in the title. If it's a study or a survey, that can be a use of a tag. The same thing can happen with different projects. Maybe a project on a specific topic has a keyword. We all call it the rainbow project or something, but that isn't what it actually. Rainbow doesn't tell us anything about what the subject is, but everybody's going to call it the rainbow project. Well, give it a tag like that. The other thing with tagging is you have to be consistent with them. So if it's reports with an S, everything has to be reports with an S. If you make a report versus the reports, it's not going to have the same thing. So be consistent. What I used to do is I created glossaries or cheat sheets for specific teams, or if they were within a certain team project and they went to pull up tagging, there's you can actually pull up tags that are being used within that specific team. So be consistent. That's one of the big things. Same thing happens with dates and description formats, set up those consistently with file names and that, and provide your staff with your guidelines because clear rules, that will eliminate a lot of confusion. And keep them simple. Simple tags mean less confusion. and mean more efficient searching. So those are my key guidelines for tags.
You made me think, Marion, of, every organization has its own internal nomenclature for some projects, as you mentioned, or initiatives or terminology that are used that people who join the organization may not be familiar with those. So having some glossary of terms and also being able to connect your search. What are people searching for? Are they finding content? Are they using terms that aren't being tagged with content and minding that gap? So if you can use your analytics to inform your tagging and miss tags for content, it's a great way to approach it.
That's right. The other thing, Rob, is that I know your platform has a really great search engine, and show people how to do that advanced search. A lot of people don't realize that they can filter their results. You can filter, by searching by people, searching by the tags, searching within a certain, date range, all of those things. And, that really minimizes, the results and really helps you if that you're that kind of person that I'll know it when I see it. Too often we what I used to call satisfice. It's I'm going to be satisfied by what it you know what system you know turns out for me, but that isn't always exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. I just want to hop in here, just keeping an eye on the time. We have about 6 minutes left. I want to say a quick thank you, and I want to take this time to invite any questions from our audience here. Just feel free to type it in the chat. We'll answer them. We also have a couple of questions that we kind of get a lot from customers about this. So yeah, just take your time, type in the chat. But
I know we also asked people when they registered for some challenges that they have related to the topic that were shared. If we didn't touch on one or some question related to the challenge you had, that would be great to surface it here too. Thanks for sharing, David, your practices and how you manage tagging. That's excellent.
Those are perfect. David, yeah, think about who it is, what's the main topic. I love the idea, including the official document name. That you might not always have to put in a tag, but having clear titles, and consistency, with titles, and resource type. I love the ID with a document. I always used to that's something I always used to put in my footer of a document. And again, remember that your content, if it's a document that's on your intranet, your search engine will search your full document too. So if that information somewhere is in that document, it will find it.
I always find listening to areas around kind of searching for information so interesting because it really is in the details that makes it something efficient or inefficient, right? It's those little things that make something work or not work. Yeah. It doesn't look like we have any questions here, but if you have any questions or can think of anything else that comes up, I just wanted to kind of share Miriam's contact information. You can feel free to email her here or connect with her on LinkedIn. That's right, Marianne, right?
Yep. Follow me on LinkedIn. I love followers. And you'll find, I love search. I love accessibility of documents and social media efforts for government. So those are the kinds of topics you'll see me talking about on LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me, please.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you're a big passionate about accurate information finding, so that's incredible. If you are interested in more resources, we have plenty of resources on this on our blog here. I'll be sending out a recording of this webinar tomorrow and along with these slides. So feel free to click on this, all these links, or visit our website for more free resources. Um, yeah. We want to thank everyone for joining us again and taking the time of your day to listen to us chat about effective knowledge governments. We hope to see you next time. We hope that you had a great webinar.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Thank you, Rob and Jasmine, for inviting me to speak with you today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, pleasure to have you,
Awesome.
Marion. So much to digest from that. So really appreciate it.
Right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Bye.
Bye.